write a lot about banks and banking frauds and things which happen in banks. Uh, but more importantly, I write about people working in these banks. And I think uh, people are the same across all parts of life, right? People are largely grey. And when you write about grey characters, then the story automatically takes shape. But as you notice, I'm trying to answer the question without answering your question because if when I write books, I actually borrow heavily from real life instances, and a lot of things which have happened in the book have happened to various people in real life. In the sense that if you track the life of a character in my book, more often than not, you will not find a similar character in real life. But the things which happen with that character in that particular book would have happened to multiple people in real life. So it's like what happens in real life are those small nuggets, are those small jewel pieces, right? And then uh, I kind of string them in a nice little necklace, which is the story that I create, and then present to the audience. I guess that would be a better way to put it. But yes, most of the instances in most of my books are true.
Have you ever gotten into trouble for sticking to fact a little too much?
Almost. In the first book, which was possibly the closest that one got to tracking the life of a individual from start to finish, uh, but reasonably disguised. The bank in question, I was told, was planning to sue me. But there's a point to note there, which is that if you stand up and say that this guy has written this book about me, what does it mean? It means you're accepting that everything that's written in the book has happened in your organization, right? So, more often than not, uh, it doesn't reach that stage because the moment you acknowledge it, then you're asking for trouble yourself. So, it's like I remember this book called The Bikini Murderers by Farooq Dondi, which was about Charles Shobraj. And I remember him going on a news channel and people trying to tell him that Charles Chopra is going to to sue him because of the storyline kind of being his own story, and he was nonchalant. He said, "Look, that's fine. You know, if he sues me, then he's going to go to jail because uh, it's obvious that the story is his. So he's accepting it. So none of the bad guys will ever accept the story is theirs."
That's very smart. So, you've quite often been described as the John Grisham of banking in India. Is that what you set out to achieve?
Actually, no. In fact, that's something which is a bit of a baggage one, and I don't know where it came from. Uh, I guess just because when I started writing, most all my books were set in the world of banking. I think it just kind of got associated, but and some journalist somewhere put that out, and it stuck. And it's just one of those things which have stuck, and I'm trying to shake it off vigorously, but I guess everywhere I go, I get asked this question, and I've tried writing books outside the world of banking. I've written romance. I have written a book which is in the name of God, which is completely out of the world of banking, and I consider that one of my best books. And but yet, I guess being a banker and writing books based in the world of banking is something which is an association which can just not be forgotten.
Okay, and so that comes to my next question. From the world of banking, romance, thriller, you have just ventured into writing children's books. Okay, what happened there?
So, one, uh, multiple reasons, and I'll be honest about it. Uh, One, when you are slotted as a thriller writer, okay, uh, and you want to break out of that mold and want to write and experiment new books because a writer should be able to write almost everything, right? You know, if you are a good writer, you value your craft, then you're doing injustice to the craft by boxing yourself into one space. Okay, you may have created a set of readers who read your books in the world of banking, right? Written in the world of banking, but you are just being stereotypical now. You're just not experimenting, just not trying to do something different. Now, even when you yourself bring yourself to write something else, the first hurdle is the publisher. Okay. The moment you go to the publisher and say, look, I want to write a romance, I want to write a children's book, the guy said, no, 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 don't. Okay, nobody's going to buy those books. Okay, you are a thriller writer, we want you to be a thriller writer, so continue writing thrillers. Okay, now you do it for some time because in the initial phases you need the publisher, right? But at some point in time you decide to put your foot down and say, look, I want to do something different. And that's how the romance and these kind of books came up. The most difficult thing for you to do as an author is to write books for children. You know, people may think, Arey, this is a small 50-page book, what's the big deal in writing? No, it doesn't work that way. Children are very, very different readers compared to grown-ups. Grown-ups will give you a chance. Grown-ups will read 100 pages and then judge you. Children will judge you from page number 1. Okay? So if you don't catch their attention on page number 1, they have dropped you. And they will never, ever pick up your book again. And by the time you make overtures, you kind of create more content, give it to them, they would have grown out of that age. Right? So essentially, children are the most difficult to keep engaged, and I wanted to write books in the world of children. So that was one. Second was that it really upsets that when you go to, in a large country of 1.5 billion people, you go to the stores, to the bookstores. One, there is no children's section. Okay, children's section is very, very small, and you only find 2 or 3 authors who are of an Indian background. Every other author is an international author. Probably parents don't want their children to read Indian authors or whatever, I don't know. Okay, or there aren't enough children's books available in that space. So I said, at least let me make my contribution towards it. Set up at least create a story which is based in India, which is a mystery. Children are used to reading Enid Blyton, Percy Jackson, etc., which are all set in a completely different world. Let me try and give our children something which is set in our own world, okay, in a hill station in Solan. And I'm writing a series of mystery books for them based there and doing my bit there. It doesn't make too much of money, but yeah, I still gives me a lot more pleasure than seeing other books do well.
Okay, that's quite a challenge you've taken on. So, children these days, they have gadgets, and even the books they read, like for example, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, it's not even writing, it's a lot of illustration, it's a lot of things that I, as a reader, I don't even understand. So, how do you write for an audience like that? Especially, I mean, considering your children or your daughter is completely grown up, where do you get the know-how on how to write for them?
Well, I think 2-3 things here. One, when you're writing books for children, you need to just become one, right? Because, for example, when I was writing this one book, which is called The Mystery of the School on Fire. Okay, first of all, they have to have simple names. Okay, you can't really have complicated names. I and the students and the children in my book were in the 5th standard. Now, when you write a book for adults, you can assume anything, right? Because they can know or they cannot know almost everything under the sun. Whereas children, if you write a book for children based who are in the 5th standard, you have to make sure that they unravel the mystery by using things which they are expected to know when they are in the 5th standard, right? You can't use something which they are taught in the 7th and the 8th and the 9th and expect them to unravel the mystery. So that becomes a bit of a challenge because children's knowledge just skyrockets, right? It like goes in by leaps and bounds. So depending on the age of the child in the book, you have to present the story. And two, I think your language has to be very simple. Simple. The more complicated language you use, the faster children will dump your books these days. So it's and and three, I think you have to make sure that the book moves at a pretty fast pace because our children are very demanding.
Okay, and you are one writer who still has a full time job. You have not gotten into writing full time. Was that a conscious decision? Or, I mean, there are a lot of writers who, like, who quit and go into writing full time. So, why did you make the decision not to do so?
How many of you here want to write a book? Okay. Almost all of you, all of us in a lifetime want to write a book, right? My only request to you, and seriously consider this, okay? There is no bravado in saying, I'm going to quit my job and write a book. Okay, it doesn't work that way. Trust me, you need to pay your bills as an author. So, in India, in the Middle East, and in the world over, only the best selling authors make reasonable amounts of money so as to make a living. In India, I can count the authors who can make their money and make a living out of writing books. I can count them on my fingertips. So, my sincere advice to you is, and nobody writes a bestseller, right? What you write becomes a bestseller. So, write your books, give it your all, and wait for it to become a bestseller. Then write the next bestseller, then write the next one, and then if you have a history of success, then start thinking of giving up your job. But having said that, I personally will never give up my job for writing, and there's a reason for it. When I started writing my first book, which is If God Was a Banker, I wanted to write for the fun of it. Okay, writing for me was fun, was a passion, was an escape from reality, right? Into my own world where I'm the boss. I can do what I want to do. I can kill whoever I want to kill. I can beat up anybody. I can do anything and everything. Okay. If my boss is taking my case in office, I can take his case in the book. So it was like I am my boss. Now, if I make that my life, okay, make that my vocation, then it will become boring. So for me, my job is good, gives me my money, pays my bills, takes care of my life, and writing gives me fun. Writing is my escape from reality, and I will never compromise one for the other.
That's amazing.
Chances are, if there is a point in time when I have to choose one of the two, I'm not 100% sure it will be writing. It can actually be my job as well. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting point. So I'm actually intrigued by A, how do you find the time to write? And B, do you have a writing process?
A lot of people that you meet, and I'm sure a lot of people that you would have interviewed on the stage, would advocate a certain sense of discipline, right? As a writer, you have to be disciplined. But it ends there. It's a fact that you have to be disciplined, but your rigor is entirely yours. You decide how you want to do it. Whether you are a 5 o'clock morning guy, whether you are a 10 o'clock night guy, whatever, it's up to you. The way I used to do it was I used to come back home on time at 6:30 from work, and I normally sleep very late. I sleep at about 1:32 kinds. So my writing time used to be 9:30 after dinner, and 9:30 till about 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, depending on what I'm writing. If you're plotting, trust me when I say this, you plot a story 24/7. Okay, you're driving, you're crossing a pothole, you are thinking about a story. Okay, is how the pothole can kill someone, right? So it's like whatever you do, you're turning the pages of a newspaper, you're looking for a story in it. You are talking to someone, you suddenly hear some interesting nugget, that becomes a part of the story. So I think your curiosity is 24 by 7, your plotting is 24 by 7, your discipline is more in terms of getting that 25th hour to write a book, right? Because the 25th hour has to come in from the 24 hours in a day. So you will have to give up something. And two, you will have to prioritize. I think that's the other thing which sounds like sermonizing, but the days when I'm actually writing in full flow, I kind of cut out socializing. I don't go out, meet friends. I come back home, stop watching TV, and then you start focusing more on writing. I have this large glass cupboard in my house. Okay, it's got an opaque glass. So I kind of start drawing flowcharts in that, saying, okay, fine. If this happens, then that can happen. This can happen. This can happen. And then I think, what is the reader expecting? Okay, and then knock that off, and then take the path which none of the readers would expect, and kind of just draw those flowcharts for the next 2-3 chapters, write them, and then move on to the next few chapters. That's the way I kind of write. The other thing about writing, which you need to keep into account, and keep into account really seriously, is that as a writer, you don't necessarily need to have the entire story in front of your eyes before you start writing. I think a lot of us make that mistake, which is we never start writing because we think, अरे पहले पूरी कहानी तो आ जाए, उसके बाद लिखेंगे. Okay, let me first get the story, then I will write. You will never have that story. Okay, all the books that I have written so far, I have never had the story in front of my eyes except for one. Okay, and in that I thought I had the entire book covered when I started writing. In 30 pages, whatever I had thought was the entire story was complete. So then I was back to square one. So it doesn't work that way for me, at least. But I also know a few friends of mine who are also big authors, who are big names in mythological thrillers and mythology writers in India. They actually plot the entire story on an Excel worksheet, chapter 1 to chapter 100, what all they want to cover. They actually write that down, and then it becomes easy for them to write the entire story. I just wrote 2 paragraphs, okay, and the chapter, and my main character was found dead in the park. End of story. Well, as in then, it's even more complicated, right? You killed off your main character, then how do you write the next 30-40% of the book? What happened? It was a book called Bankrupt, in which the main character, who was loved by everyone, who was a professor in the United States, married to an investment banker in India. She dies.
You didn't revive her?
No.
Oh, no.
But sometimes it works, because the shock value of that, kind of just wakes up the reader, right? And saying, oh my God, what happened just now? And I think those shock values actually keep you going in a thriller. That suspense, that unexpected, is really a good thing to do.
And what kind of feedback do you get? Like, do you listen to feedback, or is there an ideal reader in your mind? How do you go about this entire process?
So I do listen to feedback, and feedback you get is of all kinds. Okay. Now, the first feedback that I got, okay, I still remember. And if I had gone by that feedback, I would not have written any book after that. The book said, the feedback said, the blog will still be up on the net, you can actually see it, okay? It said, Ravi Subramanian has done the impossible. He's written a book worse than Chetan Bhagat. Okay, that was the blog post which came up within the first week of my book, If God Was a Banker, coming out. Okay, and then it goes on to be so caustic. It said that all the books should be burnt and the shops should be sprinkled with Ganga Jal. You can actually read it; it will be there somewhere. Okay, and I didn't know what to do in those days. I was immature. First book, matlab maine mehnat ki hai, who are you to write such feedback. So I also went and left some comments on that blog, okay, saying what the hell. But now you are a lot more mature, you know how to take feedback. And at that point in time, that book gave me 3 points of feedback. One, in that book, characters were either good or bad. Okay, and good or bad characters are very easy to create, right? You keep saying bad things about one character, the character becomes bad. You keep saying good things about certain characters, the character becomes good, right? So easy. Creating grey characters is difficult. Two, it said my book did not have a female character, a lead, a strong female character in that book, if God was a banker. And the third feedback was that it had a fair bit of sprinkling of unnecessary adult content in the book. Okay. So there was a guy who said, I wrote to me saying I bought this book for my daughter, but after reading it, I'm not going to pass it on to her. So now those are strong feedbacks. So after that, every single book of mine, every single character, I took it to the other extreme. Every single character in all my books are grey. You won't find a single black or white character in my book. Everybody is grey. And that kind of reflects the way humans are. And two, after that, most of my books have a very strong female character. And three, I think I've kind of avoided all kinds of mature scenes after that book. Unless, of course, there's one story which demanded it, so it kind of is there. But apart from that, I've kind of stayed away from that.
Wow, interesting. So now, of late, there has been a lot of focus on books being turned into movies, into series. One of yours has been turned into a series on Amazon. Have you ever thought about writing a script for films? I know you really enjoy films. You've written blog posts about how there's a lack of plots in Bollywood, and I know you're someone who really enjoys movies. So is that on the cards?
I watch a lot of movies. In fact, I think I watch about 3 movies a week, sometimes more. But of late, I've been very disappointed at the quality of the movies which are coming out. And but having said that, to the question on books being turned into movies, one of my books, which is the bestseller she wrote, was turned into a Amazon Prime series called Bestseller. Now, all I can say is it's a well-made web series, no doubt. Okay, and I've got the due credits for that. So it opens, every episode opens with based on the novel Bestseller she wrote by Ravi Subramanian. But if you were to read the book and were to watch the web series, as in, you would not make the connection that it's the same book. Forget relating to the book and saying, okay, these things are different. You would not make the connection at all. Now, that's the problem I have with books being converted into movies. The one, books are written for a different audience. The audience which watches films is a larger audience, and the audience which reads books is only a subset of that audience, a small subset, right? So films are made for the largest set of people who are not as evolved as the book reading population. So they have to be reasonably dumbed down. And when a complicated story gets dumbed down, as authors, you don't like it, right? So one, I will never write a script for a movie. They say in life, don't say never ever, okay? But like if you have to use legal terminology, then the state that I am in right now, given the information that I have right now, I am unlikely to write a script for a movie in the coming few years, okay? Now, and there's a reason for it. The reason for it is that, one, authors never like to be told what to put in the story. Okay? The story is mine. It is not yours through me. right? It's a story that I write. And when I write, you can have an opinion whether it's good or bad, but your opinion, keep to yourself. Don't ask me to change my story. When you write a script for a movie, you are expected to put the director and the producer's commercial needs in, keep them in mind and put that into your story. And that is not good for an author. Two, uh, and this is a problem with me and maybe a few people from a corporate background who write books, right? When you reach a certain level of seniority in your corporate life, okay, again, you know, your ego comes in, right? You always used to getting your way around in your office life, and suddenly when you are a nobody in the world of films, right, and people just push you around, it doesn't अच्छा नहीं लगता है. So then you say fine, वो कर लो यार, मेरे को नहीं चाहिए. And that's why you would find that many authors, okay, and Bollywood as an industry is not a very nice industry to deal with. So you would find that many authors stay away unless there is a commercial compulsion. And I'm saying this very carefully. Today, when you walk in, the number of people in the alley is a lot more than people inside the bookstores. Okay, you go to Jaipur Lit Fest, which is the largest lit fest in the country, in the world, one of the largest lit fests in the world. You know who makes the maximum money there? The guy who sells chai in the Kulhad. Okay, he sells 10 times the value of the books sold in that festival. Now that speaks about a certain change or shift in the way our society is treating books. People don't read. You know, today in India, a lot of people will not acknowledge this. Okay, a lot of publishers will not acknowledge this. But the fact remains that best-selling authors' sales over the last 3-4 years has dropped by roughly 60%. And that's a huge number. Okay? If best-selling authors have dropped by that level, you can imagine somebody who's a novice, who's publishing his first book. So that needs to change. And as a consequence, what's happening is people who at some point in time gave up their jobs because they were writing books and making reasonable amount of money to make a living, are suddenly finding that they are not making the same amount of money that they used to make. What do? In a corporate life, every year you get those 10, 12, 15, 20% increments and you go up in life, right? Yeah. Whereas in writing books, if your sales are diminishing, then it doesn't augur well. Then people are forced to take up writing scripts, getting into films, and because of those compulsions. But hand on heart, we've had this conversation with multiple authors as friends, and it's not a great thing to write scripts. So, but yes, there are a certain set of script writers who know how to do that thing, and they're good at it. So I personally, you want to buy my book and make a film out of it, be my guest. But I'm of the school of thought that if you are a published author who's published books, if somebody says, here's the money, sell me your rights, take the money and scoot. Don't get into writing scripts. Don't get into getting involved in how the film is made or how the entire story, because it's going to be a disaster. It's a given thing. 300 pages of a book converted to 100 pages of a script, add a little bit of masala of the commercial requirement, you had a disaster if you're an author. So stay away.
Okay, so your daughter was a published author at the age of 12, and you just told me she's now 22, and she wants to do something in creative writing. So I think I ask on behalf of all parents, especially now kids are not reading much. Their attention spans are going down by every day because of gadgets. They're constantly entertained. How do you get your kids to read and write more?
I can only come up with 2 or 3 suggestions here, which may not be applicable 100% in all the cases, yet I would probably state them. And first and foremost, uh, you need to read for your children to become a reader. It does not mean that if you don't read, your children will not become readers. No, it doesn't mean that. But if the parents read, the children have a better probability of reading, because children normally follow parents as role models. And if they read when they are 5, 6, 7 years old, they will read throughout their lives. Okay? So that's point number one. Point number two is, we as parents, and I am also guilty, okay, we as parents try to dictate and try to impose what to read on children. Don't do that. They're not going to listen to you. The moment you start pushing them towards reading something that you want them to read, they will stop reading. Right? So don't do that. Even if they're reading some junk, let them read. As long as it's age appropriate, let them read it. It's not that they're going to become bad citizens or good citizens only on the basis of reading. Trust the values that you inculcate and let them read what they want to read. If you do these 2 things, and 3, it's a more difficult thing, but try and restrict the screen time for children so that they are forced to read. And lastly, I think if you can propagate reading as a group activity for children, they would love to do it, because then they always like to be with their friends rather than with the parents. So it will just help. Propagating reading in school has its benefits, but somewhere children look at school as a place where they have to do tasks, right? Not particularly as a fun space. So I think largely parents also reading along with the children, and 2, allowing them to read what they want to read will probably help children read. And but having said that, I think the challenge is a lot more than what we are simplifying right now. Children's lives are a lot more complicated than it was when we were kids. So I guess it'll evolve, or maybe 20 years from now we may not even have books and we only have films and the visual media. We never know. We just have to be prepared for that. These are not written by me, but these are written by new or first-time authors who have been mentored by me. So I work with a set of authors and get them to write stories and publish them as a co-authored book along with those authors. There's a logic for that. And the reason for that is, one, nobody is willing to publish first-time authors these days. Right? There are so many good authors who then start looking for your vanity publishing, who look for self-publishing, rather than actually go to traditional authors, traditional publishers. Traditional publishers have a certain amount of value, right? So that they bring to the table. This one gives a platform for good new thriller writers to find shelf space. That's one. 2, I find that in a large country like India, what sells? Can you guess what sells as a genre? Thrillers are way down. What sells is romance, mythology, and thriller is somewhere 3rd or 4th. Okay. And the reason for that is that if you pick up my book, okay, if you pick up an Ashwin Sanghi's book, they're all multiple layers within layers. Okay, so they are complex stories. Now, complex stories needs the reader to be involved in the story. Okay, you miss 10 pages, you may have missed a red herring. So you have to stay involved in the story for you to read. Whereas a linear romance may actually just be, you can just read on a metro and just be done with it. So a lot of youngsters are picking up romance because it's easy to read, and probably it's the need of that particular age to read more romance. through shorts, we are giving people simple, linear thriller stories, which, if they start reading when they are 16, 17, 18, 20, then over a period of time, they will start graduating to a lot more complex stories, and thrillers will then find a larger market in the country. So it's a bit of both. I don't make much money in that at all, but the objective is clearly, if more thriller writers get published, more thrillers will come out in the world, and hence more people might end up reading thrillers, and hence that may give the genre an uplift. That's the intent. But we've brought out 2 stories till now. 2 more are slated to come out in February and March, and then every 6 to 9 months there will be 2 stories coming out. So I will publish only 2 stories maximum with one first-time author. So that's the way it's kind of scheduled. We have contracted for 12 novels in the first go. Let's see how many we are able to put out.
So, how has the experience been mentoring first-time authors?
Oh, it's good in the sense that it's always fun, right? Here you have to tell them what to do, so it's a lot more easier than putting pen to paper and writing. It's always easy to find fault in somebody else's writing when So it's an easier thing to do, but yeah, the enthusiasm among the younger crowd to write, I think, far outpaces the enthusiasm in the younger crowd to read, and that's the worry I have.
Oh, really? How come?
We talked about this number of people in the aisle and number of people in the stores, right? You walk into any bookstore today, okay? How many people do you get? Forget people in the bookstore. There are no bookstores these days. There was a time when, in a large country like India, I take India as an example because I come from there. In a large country like India, there won't be more than 500, 700 good bookstores across the country. Now, I have very, very strong views about that. A country which does not have bookstores cannot have culture. A generation which grows up without books and without bookstores grows up as a cultureless generation. And to me, it really hurts to see the fact that bookstore after bookstore is shutting down in our country. And what that does to you, Nasreen, is that when a new author comes out, for example, okay, how do you make sure people know that you have written a book? Right? You can post on Instagram, you can put on Facebook, you can tweet about it, you can send your books to influencers, etc., etc., etc. But the biggest way, we got lucky in that sense. But the biggest way in which people can discover books is walking into a bookstore and browsing. Okay? Online, you go to pick up what you want. Right? Bookstores tells you that this is there which you don't want, but maybe you can try it out. So bookstores offline, you discover what you don't want, but online you discover what you already want. So you don't go. How many of you here actually go out and on online to look for new authors? No one, right? One out of the entire lot. There were more hands raised for wanting to write a book, right? Now, isn't that now when you walk into a bookstore, you go and buy 3 books that you want, and you also browse around and say, "Acha, ye acha lag raha, this is nice, let me buy this also, let me buy this also." You come out buying 5 books. You may only want 2. But that does a lot of wonders to new authors, to the trade, to the bookstores, the entire community around it. Look at India. Amazon bought Westland. Westland eventually shut down. Why? Now, did Amazon actually buy Westland to make astronomical profits? Then why did they shut it down? But they did. Look at what it did to hundreds of authors. We authors were lucky enough that, we just had to send our books to another publisher and we were published. But there are hundreds and thousands of other authors who wouldn't find the nest. What do you do with them? So, bookstores have a role to play in the society, and today I don't know how we started conversing about bookstores, but yeah, but bookstores is where people discover books, and bookstores is where people uh, find new authors. And to me, I think if you guys get an option, buy from bookstores. It's a few days back in Bombay, I, I inaugurated a bookstore in a suburb called Vikhroli, and it gave me so much of pleasure to inaugurate that bookstore. Okay, I have never got that pleasure while I was inaugurating my own business branch. I run a housing finance company, and we have about 150 branches, and I didn't get the same pleasure. In a sense, I got a lot more pleasure while inaugurating the bookstore than I got while cutting the ribbon in my own branch. So it's an emotional rant, but I guess you guys should go to the bookstores.
You've given us so much to think. Everyone's just like, thinking about different points. Okay, I know I don't have a lot of time left, so I'm opening the floor for questions. If anyone has questions, please raise your hand. Do we have a mic?
Just shoot.
Hi, I'm Kash from DPA Sharjah. As a writer, I'm genuinely interested. What is the least enjoyable part of writing a book?
What is the least enjoyable part of writing a book? Uh, you want an honest answer?
Yeah.
Everything that comes after you've finished writing the book is the least enjoyable part of writing. In the sense that, uh, when you write a book, you're in the flow, right? Your adrenaline is pumping, you know what you're writing, sometimes get lost, sometimes you rewrite, sometimes you write more, you cut back, etc., etc., etc. A lot of fun in it. Okay? Seeing the book, the first draft of the manuscript, wonderful. Seeing the first copy of the book is like the most awesome feeling on planet, right? After that, you have to go and promote your book, right? And that's a task which can really get to you, okay? And a lot of people are very bad at it, just suck at it, in the sense that you put out social media posts, if somebody praises your book, you have to put that up back on social media saying, oh, so-and-so said so-and-so. You have to put your own pictures there, you have to put your book's pictures there, run after influencers, chase your publisher to put out press releases, chase your publisher to send you to Litfest, etc., etc., etc. And then you can do it once, you can do it twice, but eventually it does get to you, and you start. Most of the authors, 90% of the authors, do not like what comes after you have written a book.
Thank you.
Who happens to be your first critic?
My first critic is invariably my daughter and my wife, because they get to read the first draft, and thankfully they are under no obligation to keep me happy. So, so they come up with very honest feedback, and with my daughter, I often discuss the script, and in fact, I used to do it a lot more when she was younger, because the childlike innocence actually gives you a lot of ideas, and that sometimes I've used in my books as well.
All right, thanks. One.
I'll just come back to you.
I'm Siddharth Ajit from DPS Sharjah. I would just like to know, what would be the first advice you would give to a child who is writing a book?
So my first advice to child who's writing a book is, okay, and this is a very honest advice. Okay, now I have recommended a lot of child writers who have written manuscripts to various publishers, and the constant refrain that I get from them is that this book is influenced by Percy Jackson. This book is influenced by ABC. So my only advice to you is, don't listen to anybody on the style that you write, of style of writing. Do what you think is right. But as far as the story is concerned, do not set out to write another Percy Jackson. Do not set out to write any of the other books that you've read and you liked. Try to do try to be a trendsetter yourself. It's not easy, but try to write a story which nobody would have read.
One more question. What was your inspiration while writing your first book?
Interesting question. And it's, and I'll be brutally honest about it, okay? The first book that I wrote, If God Was a Banker, I wrote in 2006, got published in 2007, okay? And I would have been very happy with just that book, okay? I just wanted to publish one book in my life. And the reason for that was that all of us have this fear that after we die, people will forget us. You know, all of us have this fear, right? Ki, people will still forget you. But we have that fear, right? But the thought is that people remember creative people for a lot longer. You know, today if you ask me, 10 years back, who was the CEO of Citibank? Nobody will know. But you ask me 10 years back, what was the book Jeffrey Archer wrote? Everybody would know. So, somewhere creative people tend to get remembered longer because long after you're gone, there is some library in the world which will have your book, which will scream your name across to people reading the books from that library. My only intent of publishing a book was the desire to be remembered after I am dead and gone. But then that book became a reasonable success. And after that book became a success, honestly, success makes you greedy. You want more of it, right? And that's when the second book happened, the third book happened, the fourth book happened.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, he had another question. So, yeah.
When you were talking, you were saying like the initial stages, the books that you had written across, the concept was all based on the real life experiences or multiple elements were taken across from that. But when it gets on into kids' stories, you said you'll have to live a life of a kid, but where do you get those concepts from?
So, okay, very interesting question. The first time somebody's asked me this question. So I'm going to tell you the real story behind it. I came from a school called Sacred Heart Convent School in a place called Ludhiana. Okay, Ludhiana is in Punjab. So I was born and brought up there and studied in that school. The principal's name was Sister Maria Lina, who was the principal of the school. Now, the two thrillers that I have written, which is The Mystery of the School on Fire and The Mystery of the Missing Cat. Okay. Now, both these stories are set in Sacred Heart Convent School in Solan. The principal's name is Maria Lina. The classrooms resemble my classrooms in school. And the story all revolved around the way we used to prance about in our childhood. So the setting all comes from there. And then there are instances in the book which come from things we've learned in real life. For example, what we used to do in our physics lab, what we used to do in our chem lab, what we used to do during the school schools, I don't know whether they still have it, but in those days, schools used to have inspections, right? There used to be an inspector who would come and check everything, and then all the students used to be very well dressed and stand up and GK test hota tha, and then so that if he asks you certain questions, you can answer those questions. So all those, and the first book is a story of a school where during one such inspection, this school is a public school in Solan, a convent school in Solan, is losing a lot of ground to an international school which has been set up. Okay, and a lot of teachers from here are going there because they're paid more, etc., etc. And on the day of the inspection, the physics lab catches fire. So, and this has happened a couple of times in the past as well. So how does that happen is what the story is, and the children actually unravel that mystery using concepts that they have learned in the past. So bulk of it is what we have seen with obviously a little bit of creativity. And me and my wife are cat lovers. We don't have cats at home, but we kind of are cat lovers. So the second book, which is the story of the missing cat, is based on various mannerisms of cats which children know more than the grown-up adults. And it's a story where in Solon there's a cricket match between India and Australia, and India has to win that match. If India loses that match, Virat Kohli will lose captaincy and Rohit Sharma will become the captain. So, and there's somebody trying to put pressure on Virat Kohli to lose the match. So the children then figure that out. So it's a bit of things like these, which part of it which we learned in our childhood, part of which we learned now, which we wish our children knew. So it's a bit of all that.
Are you ever satisfied with the end result you have, and how hard do you find editing your books?
How hard do I find?
Editing your books.
So, can you guess how many times we as authors read our books again and again and again and again?
10 times, 15 times?
So typically from the time you write the first draft and the time the book comes out, you would have read your book at least 20 times. Okay, and rewritten bits and pieces of the book again and again. So editing is painful. Okay, now, but having said that, I think what comes out in the end really gives you a lot of pleasure. It takes away the pain of editing. And there are times when you're editing a book, when you get into a blind spot, you just don't know. You don't realize that there is a mistake in the page and you move on because you have read it so many times that you know what's next and you can tend to ignore it. And that's why you are well served if you, one, have a professional editor, and two, if you also give your book to people who you know to read so that they point out the mistakes, right? And what was the second question?
Are you satisfied with the end result?
So I have never ever read my book after it's come out. Okay, because I've read it so many times before that I have never ever read my book after it's come out. Not even to find the mistakes in the book. So you're done. The moment the book comes out, the book is yours. Okay? And the pleasure is in seeing the finished product. But there are a lot of people who I know, some of them who sit with the book and keep reading it again. The pleasure for me is in the process.
Thank you so much.
And to answer your question, I think I saw a lot of hands go up when they said, how many of you want to write a book? It's the only thought I want to leave you with is that there is no right time to start a book. In the sense that, you can be 10 years old, you can be 70 years old. You can still write your first book. That's one. Two, don't follow laid out process or protocol. There is nobody, and I repeat this, there is nobody on this planet who knows what will make a book a success. Right? If you go back and look, most of the people who have become successful have been trendsetters. You've never become successful by writing a Me Too story. Go back and look at India. Chetan Bhagat became a success. I'm talking only of popular fiction here because he started writing popular stories which nobody else wrote. Amish became a success because of mythology. Ashwin became a success because of thrillers. And so everybody who became successful because they kind of were trendsetters in their own small way. So do not become a Me Too. Try to write your own story. There is no right time to write a story. It can be any time. And do not wait for the entire story to take shape in your mind. And lastly, don't worry about getting it published. Lot of us saying, "Arey, meri kitab kaun padega? Who will read my book? Why should I write? Who will publish my book?" And those are all excuses of a lazy mind. You give yourself a better chance at publishing your book once you've written the book. Otherwise, what are we talking about? Right? So I think that's my message to all of you. And once you write your book, I would love to read it. So best of luck, and thank you very much for coming here.